Hi folks, and welcome to this craft project. So in this project I'm going to make a new coat for my Petit Qoobo. The last coat that I made for my Qoobo, I incorporated polymer clay ears that we flocked, some button eyes and a polymer clay muzzle that we flocked, and used this sort of three-tone fur. And since that project I've started using Pomsies as a base and making latex faces that I then flock. So this was the first one that I made with silicone paw pads, and this was the second one that I made, and I used latex for the paw pads on this one. So what I want to do in this project is combine a Pomsie with a new fur cover for my Qoobo. But the Pomsie I'm going to use in this project is different to the Pomsie I used in the other two projects, because this is a puppy personality. So it's got puppy sounds. So I'm going to use the same mould for the faces I used for this one, but I'm hoping that it's going to be better because on this one we used adhesive for the flocking, which is stiff, so it can crack because it's not flexible like the latex. So on this next one we're going to use latex as the adhesive for flocking instead of using the normal adhesive. I'm going to use the same styling, so I'm going to use the same ears and paws and paw pads. So this should be really interesting because I'm going to have puppy sounds that I've not had before, and of course that'll be combined with the sophisticated movement of the Qoobo tail. So the first thing I need to do is to remove the fur from this Pomsie. I've still got some bits around the eyes here to remove, but I'll do that later. So that's the switch for the nose, obviously. This copper tape is the mouth sensor. And then, as with the other Pomsies, we've got a touch sensor on the front of the head and a touch sensor on the back of the head. So the next thing to do is to get Paul to lengthen these two wires. So Paul has kindly extended those wires for me now. So now I can move on to something else. So the next thing I'm going to do is to make a cover for the Qoobo out of this wadding, so that I've got something to sew the wadding to that I put around the Pomsie head. So I've used the original Qoobo cover as a pattern, and now I need to cut out two pieces like this. So I'll sew that together now, leaving a gap here for the tail to go through, and only sewing it so far around so that I can still manage to pull it over the Qoobo. So I realised when I started sewing it that it didn't make sense to sew half of it and then on the other half leave a gap for the tail. I thought, why don't you just sew half of it and then the other half can be the half where the tail goes. So I've just sewn around half of it. So I'm going to see how that fits. So it looks like I can sew a bit more yet and it'll still go on, and I've got to remember to leave a gap for access to the on-off switch and to charge it as well as the tail. I'll sew a little bit more here and then I'll see if I can still fit it on okay before turning it inside out. So I've sewn it up some more and it still fits on, so I'm going to go with that and I'm going to turn it around on the correct side. So far so good. So now I'll come to the tricky bit. I've got to build some wadding around this purple head and then attach it to the wadding that I've covered the body with, and I'll be using part of the tail for that to sew it on. So I'm just going to have to play it by ear and see how it goes. So I've got some wadding and some stuffing around the head now, and I've sewn that onto the wadding on the Qoobo body, making sure that I can still have access to the battery door here to change the batteries. And it looks pretty weird at the moment. Got a hole here with the wire for the touch sensor that goes to the front of the head. Got another hole here with the wire that goes to the back of the head that's going to have a touch sensor on the wadding on the Qoobo here. So next it's over to Paul to put some copper tape, a piece on the head and a piece on the Qoobo, and join these touch sensor wires on. So Paul's done a nice job of the two pieces of copper tape and the soldering. That's how it's looking. So now I can start working on the fur. So the first piece of fur I'm going to cut is going to be a piece of white fur that is going to go on the head. And before I cut it, I'm using a comb to brush the fur back so that I'll cut just the material and I won't cut off any of the pile of the fur. So cutting the piece for the head now, and now I've turned it on the wrong side and put some pins in on either side of the head where I want some darts to go to get it to shape around the top of the head. So I've done all those darts now. I also put one at the front as well, just to give it a bit more shape. And next I'm going to cut a piece of this silver fleck fur to go on the side of the head. So I've sewn that on now. That's what it looks like on the right side. And I've also cut another piece and sewn it on the other side of the head. And I've turned that inside out now and pinned two more darts in the silver fleck fur, again to shape it around the face. So I've sewn those two darts now, and I've also cut another piece of fur to go under the chin, and I've put a dart in the middle of that already. So now I need to sew that on. And that's sewn on now, and this is what it looks like turned on the right side. And I've also cut out a piece of silver fleck fur and I've pinned it to make the tail.
So I've sewn the tail now, and this is what it looks like on the correct side. And now I'm working on the piece of fur that's going to go underneath the Qoobo. So I've pinned one side of the zip all the way around, and I'm going to sew that on now. So I've sewn that side of the zip onto the white fur now, and I've cut a piece of the silver fleck fur that's going to go on the top of the Qoobo. So I've sewn a little bit of this and pinned part of it, but I'm going to have to keep turning it inside out and trying it on the Qoobo to make sure it's still fitting okay before carrying on. I've also filled in the back of the neck with a piece of silver flack fur, and this is what it looks like put on the Qoobo. I'll have to leave a gap here so that I'll still have access to the on-off button and the charging point. So I've got it all sewn together now, and this is what it's looking like. Really pleased with it so far. So next I need to work on the face that I'll be making out of latex. So this is a latex face that I've made. And if you'd like to see how I make parts out of latex, I'll put a link to a previous video in the description below. And before we flock it, I just want to add a bit of sort of charcoal grey paint to the nose. So I mixed up a little bit of white and black paint with some latex, and that's what it looks like on the nose. So I'll leave that to dry and then we can flock it. And again, if you would like to see how we flock our latex parts, I'll put a link in the description to an earlier video. And this is what it looks like with the flock on. I was going to add some long flock, but I think I'll just stick with the short flock because that's pretty cute. So I've got the face glued on now and it's looking really neat. So we used latex when we flocked this, and the face has remained flexible, so that's definitely the way to go. So I've cut the fur out for the ears, silver fleck on one side and white on the other. And I've sewn those together now, so they're ready to be sewn onto the model. So I've got the ears sewn on now and it's looking super cute. So I've made the latex paw pad and I'm going to glue that in this piece of fur. And I've glued that into the piece of fur and I've sewn the fur up into a leg and made another leg for the front. And this is what he looks like with his front legs on. I've still got to make the back legs and I'll do an update in the near future. But I'm really pleased with how it's worked out. I think it's made a really nice combination of those two interactive critters. Certainly give the Qoobo a lot more character. But that's it for this video, folks. Thanks for watching as always, and see you next time.